Another Doctor and another regeneration story in the can. Doctor Who's enduring success can largely be attributed to regeneration, allowing the main character to change their face and the show to continue on. With the reality war likely marking the final regeneration story for quite some time, although I would have also said the same thing about the Giggle 18 months ago, now's a good time to look back and assess all those times the Doctor has come down with a severe case of the glowy face. I'm Ellie for Who Culture, and this is every regeneration story ranked from worst to best. Before the main ranking, some honourable mentions have to go to the regeneration stories that didn't quite make the cut. The Sixth Doctor's regeneration didn't occur at the end of his own era, but at the start of his successors, in 1987's Time and the Rani. And to add insult to injury, it didn't even feature Colin Baker, but rather Sylvester McCoy in a curly blonde wig. Though Baker's reason for not coming back, having essentially been sacked, was entirely justified, let's be honest. Likewise, the Seventh Doctor departed 20 minutes into the TV movie, which was the Eighth Doctor's first and only full-length adventure. Both stories should be commended for actually featuring regenerations in the first place, when they could so easily have ignored the previous Doctor altogether. That's exactly what happened when the show returned in 2005, with the Eighth Doctor's own regeneration left purely to the imagination. Thankfully, this was remedied in 2013 with the excellent minisode The Night of the Doctor, which gave Paul McGann 6 more minutes of fame. 2013 also introduced John Hurt's War Doctor, whose regeneration was incorporated into the closing sequences of The Day of the Doctor. And now, on to the 12 actual regeneration stories in the show. Starting with number 12, The 10th Planet. It's sad that last place must almost by default go to the first regeneration story in Doctor Who history. The 10th Planet is fine, but in hindsight, it's defined more by the stuff it introduced, regeneration, the base under siege format, and the Cybermen, than anything else. This is largely due to the fact that it wasn't actually conceived as a regeneration story per se. The production team was more concerned with writing William Hartnell out than giving him a proper send-off, with the previous seasons The Celestial Toymaker also considered as a potential handover. It's a shame because there's a thematic parallel between regeneration and the artificial augmentation of the Cybermen, which goes completely unacknowledged here, though it would eventually inspire the Cybermasters in The Timeless Children. It's also unfortunate that Hartnell spends a quarter of his final story, episode 3, completely out of action, and that the final episode no longer exists in the BBC archives, save for the regeneration itself. Thank God. It will always be remembered as the OG regeneration story, but there was much, much better stuff to come. Number 11, Wishworld / The Reality War. What's interesting about Doctor Who's regeneration stories is that most of them are at least pretty good, and some of them weren't intended to be regeneration stories to begin with. Despite what Ncuti Gatwa might tell you, Wishworld and The Reality War falls into that camp. Both camps, actually. There's no getting away from the fact that the final 20 minutes was reworked to accommodate Gatwa's decision to leave. But fortunately, it has a thrilling end-of-an-era feel to it anyway, thanks to the fact that it's the last of Disney's initial order of episodes. All the key players from RTD2 are back, from Rose Noble to Susan Triad, and there are some blockbuster movie-worthy VFX, from Unit's battle with the Bone Beasts to the Doctor's ride on the Rani's air scooter. And those final tacked-on 20 minutes are surprisingly convincing. Above all, the idea of the Doctor sacrificing himself to save an innocent life is just so intrinsically doctory. And the regeneration itself, from Jodie Whittaker's cameo to the Doctor bursting into starlight, was spectacular. It's by no means perfect, and it's frustrating that 15 didn't get a properly planned regeneration story. But in the circumstances, it could have been so much worse. Number 10, Planet of the Spiders. Originally, Jon Pertwee's era was going to end with a climactic Sherlock Moriarty-style showdown between the Doctor and the Master, titled The Final Game. Sadly, these plans were quashed by the untimely death of original Master Roger Delgado in June 1973. With the best will in the world, the story we got instead was never going to be quite as satisfying, and giant spiders are a somewhat puzzling choice for the Third Doctor's final foe, even if they did send viewers hiding behind the sofa. offer. That said, Planet of the Spiders does feature some neat callbacks and payoffs. There's a letter from Joe and a happy ending for Mike Yates. There's also a brilliant, if slightly indulgent, action sequence in episode 2 with the Doctor traversing land, air and sea via Bessie, a gyrocopter and the Whomobile. Most significantly of all, there's a tragic arc for the Doctor, whose decision to take the Metabilis crystal earlier in his run sets the story in motion and leads to his eventual self-sacrifice. It might not have been the regeneration story they planned, but thematically, it absolutely works. Number 9, Twice Upon a Time. Peter Capaldi had a phenomenal grand finale as the Doctor, in the form of World Enough in Time and The Doctor Falls. If that was also his regeneration story, it would be a serious contender for top spot. However, in the end, his final story was Twice Upon a Time, a story which came about through necessity rather than design, created as a means to keep the festive special slot and avoid a lengthy gap between the Moffat and Chibnall eras. On the one hand, it's an inspired choice to pair 12, the most classic coded of all the New Who Doctors, with his original incarnation. And there are plenty of nice moments which really sum up Moffat's take on the character, along with a very effective thematic link between 12 and 1 struggles to continue on. Plus, a highly emotional final speech from the king of speeches, Peter Capaldi. But the result is more of an epilogue than a story in itself. It also features some unforgivable characterization of the First Doctor, who is essentially presented as a caricature of Hartnell himself. Ultimately, it is just 60 minutes of treading water, which detracts from 12's departure somewhat, which will always be slightly frustrating as the perfect ending was literally right there. Number 8, Logopolis. No other Doctor has had as long and varied an era as Tom Baker, and wrapping it up in a satisfying way was always going to be a difficult task. The story we ended up with feels more like a finale to Season 18 and Christopher H. Bidmead's time as script editor than the Fourth Doctor's journey as a whole. Even so, it works well, adopting a foreboding, somber tone from the moment the Doctor first appears, pacing around the TARDIS cloisters. And the decision to base a regeneration story around entropy, decay, and the slow death of the universe is nothing short of inspired. There's also plenty of weird and wacky imagery, from the TARDIS materializing inside itself to the eerie figure of the Watcher, and the Master finally makes his regeneration story debut, serving as the agent of the Doctor's demise for the first time, but not the last. By the time the regeneration arrives, it certainly feels like a moment that has been prepared for. The inclusion of archive clips, another first for the show, allows all of 4's previous companions to be represented, making the sequence feel both extra special and groundbreaking. Number 7, The Giggle. As soon as David Tennant returned to Doctor Who in 2022, we knew that we would have to say goodbye to him again rather quickly. But then the 14th Doctor remained on the scene thanks to the magic of bi-generation. As such, it feels a little weird to refer to The Giggle as a regeneration story because of its unorthodox take on the process itself. But importantly, the Doctor still does renew and refresh himself. It's just that in this case, that involves enjoying barbecues with the Noble family rather than disappearing in a burst of golden energy. It also feels like a regeneration story too, with plenty of fan service, homage to the show's history, and epic moments. The first 40 minutes involves a game of cat and mouse between the Doctor and the returning toy maker, excellently reimagined by Neil Patrick Harris, I might add, with set pieces galore and a nagging sense that something bad's about to happen. As a concept, bi-generation is very controversial, but as a metaphor for slowing down and self-care, it absolutely works. Likewise, The Giggle, though unconventional, is a roller coaster regeneration story that certainly will not be forgotten anytime soon. Number 6, The War Games. The Second Doctor's era came to a close with a 10-part epic, the result of Season 6's final 2 stories falling through and the slots being merged into one. And as even the most ardent fan will admit, at 250 minutes, The War Games is just a little bit too long. However, the length also lends it a weighty, monumental feel, which befits its status as both the last Patrick Troughton story and the last one to be shot in black and white. Now, for those put off by the runtime, 2024's colorization is mercifully shorter, if a little too pacey. The plot itself, soldiers being pitted against each other in simulated war zones to create the ultimate army, is pure Doctor Who, with 2 standout villains in the form of the War Chief and Warlord. But the highlight has to be the Gallifrey set final part, which is easily one of the best in the show's entire history. In particular, the twist of the Doctor having to give up his companions and his freedom to save the day is so cruel, but so effective. Number 5, The End of Time. Writing out a Doctor as popular as David Tennant was always going to be a daunting prospect. As such, his regeneration was treated as a major event, taking place in a dedicated bumper-length special rather than a standard series finale, and the End of Time absolutely delivered. It's one of the grandest, most epic regeneration stories so far, full of heart, shocking moments, and laughs aplenty. It really does feel like the perfect culmination of Russell T Davies's first stint on Doctor Who, even if that does also mean we get the usual silly moments and overindulgence. Though many 10th Doctor plot points had already been wrapped up in the Series 4 finale, it nevertheless manages to feel like a proper conclusion, incorporating characters as eclectic as Donna, Wilf, the Master, Lucy Saxon, the Ood, and the Bana Kaphalata adjacent Finvochi. Not to mention the long-awaited return of the Time Lords and Gallifrey. Of course, though, it all comes down to something so simple and tragic, with the much-fated 4 knocks turning out to be a cry for help from Wilf. Forcing a Doctor with such a god complex to give his life to save one man was a brilliant way to do it, really highlighting the compassion and selflessness that makes the Doctor such a unique hero. The companion farewell tour is a lovely touch as well. It's perhaps a bit long, but for a Doctor and an era this beloved, it still feels deserved. Number 4, the power of the Doctor. Some Doctors spent their final hours defeating Daleks. Others spent them battling the Cybermen or the Master. The 13th Doctor's feature-length grand finale saw her face all 3 in a plot that spanned contemporary London, Rasputin-era Russia, a volcano in Bolivia, and a cyber conversion planet, all while reuniting her with Ace, Tegan, Kate Stewart, Graham, and Vinda. Sure, it's a bit of a hot mess, but on the whole, the power of the Doctor delivers the goods, balancing its various character returns and kisses to the past in a way that feels much less intrusive than some stories that have come since. At times, it risks being slightly too big in scope, and paying tribute to all of Who rather than just the 13th Doctor's era. But given its status as a special to mark the BBC's centenary, this can be forgiven. It's a triumph throughout, full of fan-pleasing elements, from the Master having his own TARDIS again, to the wonderfully innovative Hollow Doctor, Guardians of the Edge, and companion support group. Chris Chibnall lore additions that everyone can get behind. The pace never lets up either, and it absolutely flies despite an extended 90-minute runtime. Above all else, it's just so much fun. And to top it off, the 13th Doctor's regeneration is the most beautiful to date, which is helped by the fact that for the first time in New Who, it takes place outside the TARDIS. Number 3, the Caves of Andraani. The 5th Doctor's swan song is held in such high regard by fans that it was voted Best Doctor Who Story of All Time in a 2009 Doctor Who magazine poll. And there's no denying that the Caves of Andraani is a stellar story, where the various elements come together much better than they do anywhere else in the 5th Doctor's era. The central idea of throwing such a passive Doctor into such a grim, desperate scenario is inspired, as is the resolution, which sees him sacrifice himself for his companion for the first time. The cliffhanger to Part 3, which sees him crash a rocket onto the surface of the planet, is particularly striking. Equally memorable is Christopher Gable's turn as the Phantom of the Opera-esque Sharaz Jek, who is simultaneously skin-crawling and strangely sympathetic. The whole thing is elevated by Graham Harper's energetic, filmic direction, which puts us right in the middle of the action. It all culminates in a vivid, psychedelic regeneration, which once again incorporates past companions, even Chameleon. It might not quite be the best Doctor Who story ever, but it's definitely a top-tier regeneration story, though the less said about the Magma Beast, the better. Number 2, the Time of the Doctor. The 11th Doctor's era is unique in that it always had an endpoint. Sure, there was definitely some making it up as we go along the way, but from the moment Stephen Moffat wrote the line, "Silence will fall," into the 11th hour, the countdown was on to this incarnation's final battle. And the result is somewhat messy. The whole naked thing is plain stupid, the silence showing up again after being absent for all of Series 7 feels weird, and Tasha Lem should have just been River Song, let's be honest. But the ambition should be applauded, and underneath it all, the Time of the Doctor is pretty damn special. 11's legendary final battle is refreshingly low-key, and there's some really affecting stuff in there. From the scenes of him entertaining the children of Trenzalore, to his physical transformation into an older man, which in turn neatly foreshadows the arrival of 12. In addition, the return of the crack in time is a properly jaw-dropping moment, and the way it ties into more recent events, the return of Gallifrey, is very, very smart. Also, the regeneration scene itself is hands down one of the best ever. I will always remember when the Doctor was me. Plus, Murray Gold on top form. Chef's kiss. Perfect regeneration. Number 1. Bad Wolf / The Parting of the Ways. New Who's first series finale wasn't always going to be a regeneration story, with Christopher Eccleston only deciding to leave the show partway through production. Regardless, Bad Wolf and The Parting of the Ways was always designed as a big finale, because at the time, no one knew whether the show's revival was going to result in a second series. The result is a story that's epic without being overblown, rounding off the Ninth Doctor's era in a truly satisfying way. There's so much to enjoy, from the dark and dangerous future game shows to the glorious shots of Daleks and Dalek saucers en masse, something which at the time had never been seen before, to Companion That Never Was Linda with a Y. The way it wraps up the series arc, with the Doctor and Rose both saving each other, is beautiful. Likewise, the way it draws plot points from practically every episode, including the Satellite 5 game station setting, Pete Tyler's death, the heart of the TARDIS, and the Bad Wolf meme itself, is genius. The fact that we never got more of the Ninth Doctor will always be bittersweet, but the upshot is that this regeneration story has never been bettered. To quote the man himself, absolutely fantastic. And that concludes our list. Now, we do love to post some rankings on this channel. In fact, we recently did a series opener ranking after the Robot Revolution, so why not go and check that out? In the meantime, I've been Ellie for Who Culture, and in the words of Riversong herself, goodbye, sweeties.